Hi, Colleen.
Hey, Shannon.
Hey, I'm just gonna put the microphone off for right now until they start the board meeting, the finance committee meeting in a few minutes.
Oh, okay, that sounds good, and I'll put myself on mute.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, good afternoon. We'll call our June JWB Finance Committee meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. And we have Colleen on the phone, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm on the phone.
All right, awesome, thank you. Okay, so Laura, we'll turn to you and we'll talk about the monthly financial and investment reports for April.
Thank you very much. So yes, you have the financial investment report for April. I just want to point out a few things to you. Nothing major on the balance sheet, but on the income statement, or otherwise known as the statement of revenues and expenditures, just pointing out a few things. Our variance for revenues is about 5.5 million, and we anticipated that from the prior year. That's what we had thought going into it. Where we missed the mark was obviously on the investment earnings. We had budgeted, year-to-date, we budgeted, or last year this time, we had 66,000, and year-to-date, we're at 2.2 million. So we are definitely got a lot more revenues in that regard. So if you're looking at our total revenues, which would be ad valorem revenues and investments, so year-to-date, we are up 9.3%. But also looking at the program expenditure side, we're up on the program expense side of 17%. So what that is telling us is that we've spent more on the programs than we did a year ago, to the tune of 4.9 or $5 million. Just pointing out that when we're looking at these budget to actuals on the program expenses, we're a month behind because we're on a cost reimbursement basis. So even though this is a 7-month financial statement, it's really 6 months worth of reimbursements. And so just kind of keeping that in mind. But when we're comparing prior year to current year, we're comparing apples to apples. So we've spent year-to-date, 5 million more, I should say spent, we've reimbursed 5 million more on the program expense side. And then if you look at all our other expenses for the entire organization, we have spent year-to-date 40.8 million this year versus 34 a year ago. So we are spending the money, but we continue to have that reserve that we talk about and continue to talk about. Also, in these financial statements, you've got some charts that just showing you where we were. Some people see things better in a chart format than actually numbers. And it's just showing you where we were for revenues and expenses and the different administrative departments as well. You also have before you the contracts that have been signed and the budget transfers. We present those every month with our report. And then the last sheet is a breakdown of our investments. And as I indicated earlier, we were really earning money on our investments. And if you look to see the breakdown currently, and this is as of April 30th, we were getting between 4.8% and 5.06% on our investment pools, which is very nice. And then looking at the charts on the bottom of that page, since we raised the level of acceptability for our investments in the pools, we try to put as much as we can in the pool to earn the money, and then we transfer to operating accordingly. And that's because we get the majority of all our ad valorem money back in November, and then we sit on it all year, and then we move it over to spend it, throughout the year. So that's the report on the statements. Happy to take any questions or answer any.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any questions for Laura?
Nope.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move into the lapse trends in history.
Okay, so we've had a lot of discussion on lapse, and so I wanted to just go over a couple charts with you. So the first chart that you have, we've presented this before, and it's showing the different lapse dating back to 2000 or fiscal year 18. And back then, of course, that was way before the pandemic and way before everything else, we were at lapse of 10.28%. And that number has drastically increased, where it hit the top mark, if you would, in fiscal 21 of 21.24%. And I've got this blown up on the chart here, on the screen here. So you can see we were at 10.28, and then it's kind of gradually, and then the pandemic hit, and then we skyrocketed to 21. And then we made a concerted effort to bring it down in fiscal 22, which we did. We were happy with that. We were hoping that fiscal 23 projections would be even lower, and as we continue to meet with you every month, that green bar is getting a little higher and higher. I think we came to you one month and we were like, oh, we're at 16%, and then we came to you the next month, oh, we're at 17%, and now we're at 19.42. So we're kind of monitoring that. We are projecting and hoping that we can get back in line to the 10% figure in fiscal 28. But what I did for this meeting today is I kind of analyzed what the source of our lapse was, because when we talk about lapse, it's a variety of things. And I really wanted to hone in on the orange part, because the orange part is where we have a focus on trying to work with the agencies and figure out why we're not spending the money or why they're not spending it. And so when you look at this graph, it's just breaking out, and I broke it into three components. So you've got the gray part, which is what's the lapse for our general operating and overhead expenses. So we lapse internally as well, and that gray part is the portion of that. So if you're looking at fiscal 18, the total lapse was 10.28%. Of that, 3.39 of it was attributable to our operating and overhead lapse. 8.95% of that was just strictly the family and children and expenses, the orange part. And then the green, and we don't have any lapse, if you would, in that particular year, but the green would be our revenues. So I added that only because we're adding to the lapse because we had $2 million more in interest that we had budgeted for, so that's adding to the lapse. And when we're off the mark a little bit on the ad valorem revenues, that adds to the lapse as well. So I was just trying to analyze it, if you would, to kind of see where we are. But what I found when we did this exercise is we can see that the orange part is kind of been running around 15% in the last couple years, or even 11, and then in fiscal 18. And I wasn't here in 18 or 19, so I don't know what controls were in place or what we were doing to try to monitor that, and that's another discussion. But I thought this might just be a little helpful to give you a little more information relative to what I'm calling the lapse by source. So I just threw that out there for you before we get into the budget discussion. Any questions
Questions on the lapse?
on that?
I guess my only question is what remedies do we, I know you're looking through this, but what other remedies do we have? Do we have any remedies to help try to bring it down sooner than that in your projections?
That's a great question, and we are making some diligent efforts in that regard. I'll kind of kick it over to Karen. I know she and I had met prior to today in anticipation of that question, to kind of just let you know what we're doing, how we're analyzing it with the workforce stabilization, with the new programs. And so I've got the budget department working on this. I've got the program finance department working on it, and then we have the consultants as well.
Yes, so we're looking, so we'll get a lapse report for each of the programs, like what it looks like at this point in the year. But again, we talk about it's a month behind. And looking at, in particular for the summer, we know, and as we know of this year, the last few summers, due to the impact of COVID, we know that programs were not operating at their capacity. They had vacancies, both because of staffing issues as well as program participants weren't coming to the program. What we know this summer is that all of our programs are reporting out either pre-COVID numbers or even more higher participation than pre-COVID. So that's all good news. So we may be seeing something different over the summer. So we're monitoring this very closely. For workforce stabilization, our providers, and our first round started in June 2022. So just about a year ago was our first round. It was around 23 programs, and that was focused on early learning centers as well as OST. So we asked them to provide us quarterly reports, including staff turnover, staff vacancy, and then we have a little survey for them to fill out. So we're monitoring those during this time. But at the end of this year, when the books close out, we'll have a more accurate understanding of what the year and 3 months look like in terms of, did workforce stabilization have any impact? And we knew that it wasn't going to impact immediately. We knew it would take some time. So we should know, I know there's discussion internally about when the numbers are going to come in after we close out the books, but maybe as soon as December, what that would look like for that number of programs. We had another 50 programs this year that we provided workforce stabilization, so obviously that's going to take a little bit longer, but following that same path, we monitor them quarterly, but also at the end of the year to really understand how that progression or maybe lack of progression took place throughout that time period. The same thing with our new programs. They also have to do quarterly reports. So, and those were just funded as well. So we won't have a year yet for either the 50 workforce stabilization programs and the new programs until close out of fiscal year 24. So we are monitoring, but I do suspect that maybe this summer after we close out and see, we may be seeing like pre-COVID numbers, which is really good news.
I was just going to add one other thing that the budget department in conjunction with the program finance department is doing is we are creating or wanting to generate some sort of red flag analysis between all the programs, and we're in the process of putting together what we think reasonable thresholds would be, meaning if a program is at this stage of the game 25% at lapse or a certain dollar amount, that would identify on our chart that would be like a little red flag versus somebody who's in a normal lapse that would be green, or maybe one would be yellow. So we're working on that to kind of put something together that we could look at and step back, and then that would allow us to focus our time and energy and efforts on the red flagged agencies to inquire and ask those questions Now, Karen's getting all this information relative to turnover and vacancies and so forth, and that's all very helpful. But I was looking at a mechanism that we could do a higher level look and then just kind of allow us to focus in on that. So we're working on that as well.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys for staying on top of that. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to make a quick comment. If all other things were equal, between adding workforce stabilization in the early phase and adding a significant number of programs, I would actually expect lapse to go up with those two things happening. Even though over the longer haul, workforce stabilization is designed to bring lapse down and most importantly, to serve more kids and more families. We did it because the agencies were really struggling with turnover and hiring, and one significant component of that was salaries, but we were trying to give them flexibility to spend money in whatever ways would be effective. But it's not shocking that at first that money doesn't get spent, that it takes a little while for the gears to come together and do that.
Some of those are where staff is being brought on, and then you have that period of time of ramping in before it starts to come down.
Correct.
And I know at last night's licensing board meeting, they talked about the fact that JWB was providing more funding for some new staff that are coming on board and some of the new things that they're able to do with that. So I could see that there will be some impact. They're very small in comparison, but yeah.
But that's typical of other agencies.
Right.
That's a great example. And, and the agencies don't, they don't want to start advertising for a position until they absolutely know that they have the funds in place. And so there's always that gap between, when we have budgeted, let's just say October 1st, and they may advertise for it October 1st, but they don't fill it till November 1st or even December 1st, and that creates lapse. So anytime we're in a growth mode and anytime we're that we've added something, whether it's, new programs have always been that way, and we try to budget accordingly. But again, there's going to be that gap between when they're authorized to spend money, and that means we budgeted for it, we've given them their budget for it, but those positions aren't filled yet.
And that would be true internally for our staff. We budgeted for X number of new FTEs. We don't get them on board. We have the dollar amounts in the budget 10-1, but we may not hire that person until December and bring them on board, and then meanwhile you have turnover. So when you looked at that bar graph, that gray number, which was the operating, that was going up, and some of that was attributable to the fact that we just had vacancies that we had a hard time filling. And we're working on that. And so our lapse, as I was trying to demonstrate earlier, is a combination of a variety of things. It's not just the program, funding, but of course that's the largest part of it.
Yeah, thank you for staying on top of the lapse. And I think that it's noted too that COVID had a big play in this as well. When we look at the numbers, they really shot up during COVID, and the world's really just getting back to normal right now. It's taken us an extra year beyond COVID to even think about getting things back to normal, seeing summer camps fill back up and after-school care programs fill back up. Parents were still keeping their kids out of those things for a long time. So I think we're on the right track. I feel like we're heading in the right direction, and I appreciate you guys staying on top of the lapse so that the board can see what we're doing. All right, moving on to the 24 proposed budget millage rate and revised forecast.
Thank you. So this is an action item that we are presenting. When we came before the board at the June 8th meeting, we had a proposed millage rate that would continue with the current rate of 8.508. And at that time, we had discussion and so forth, but we thought we would kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of look at a couple different scenarios, knowing that this group, the Finance Committee, is really the ones that, dive deep into this and ask all the questions and so forth. So we did have some changes and tweaks to the overall assumptions, which are described in the memo relative to property values and the COLAs and all these things, and I don't want to regurgitate that and get into all of that. But What we've presented today is, I'm going to say 3 different scenarios, but you've got 4 sitting at your table, that we would like to discuss with you and explain our recommendations as well. So scenario 1, which you have in front of you, that is taking into account, I'm going to refer to it as a reduced millage rate. So it's not the rolled back rate, it's not the current rate, but it would be a reduced rate of 0.8250. And how do we come up with that number? Well, we just it was kind of in the middle. And if you remember a year ago, we had a very similar discussion where we kind of picked something that was in the middle versus where we were and what the rolled back amount was. So using this number, and we proposed that we would reduce it for 1 year and then go back to our current rate, which was 8,508. Everything else was standing the same relative to what we have forecasted and what we have assumed. This scenario would posture you in fiscal year 28 to have a reserve of 9.23%. Our goal is to bring that number to approximately 8.33, which is just to remind you that we've already set aside 2 months of cash reserve, and this is 1 additional month, which 1/12 is 8.33. Now, I know there's discussions about whether or not what's the appropriate amount of reserve. Is 3 months not enough? Is it plenty? You know, and I know there's discussions throughout the board members on that. But on this sheet, you're also going to see all the assumptions that we have put in here. And I spoke earlier about the revenues that we were getting from our investments and our earnings. So we did add another line on this, which is called interest rate. And so we are factoring in interest rate of 4.5%. I have no idea what the crystal ball is going to provide for us. But I just want to point out a couple things. If you're looking at the column, this is projected 24, and that's the budget that we're discussing today. So this is projecting that we will open the year with a beginning fund balance of $56 million. And the way our budget works is we include the prior year excess as a part of our resources. So we're starting off the year with $56 million from the previous year ending fund balance. Add to that your revenues from your property values and your other revenues, which would be your interest earnings and some sponsorships that we get for some of our events. So you would get revenues of $101 million, but availability of funds would be $158 million. Now, how are we spending that $158 million? And you can look down here, and we've got it broken down between administrative and so forth. But your biggest nut, if you would, is your program continuation. And when we say continuation, that means programs that we continue to fund. So we've allocated it and we've continued their allocations, and that amount is $97 million. And then on top of that, we've got the workforce stabilization. We've pared down the capital RFA to 2.9. We mentioned that last month as well, and that was because all the applications came in this year, and they came in at less than what we had thought. We had budgeting 3.5 or 3.25, but we pared it down to 2.9 because that's what the applications were. So what I wanted to just point out here is, so based on what we have budgeted, we've budgeted 122.7 million would be your total expenses. So if you subtract your total expenses from your revenues, that would give you a loss. So you'd have a loss of 21 million. However, we know we're going to have lapse, and we just had a big discussion about lapse. So the lapse you add back. So we add back another 18 million in lapse. So really the net effect of all of that is you're only dipping into fund balance by about 2.5 million. So if we can focus on lapse, which is what we're trying to do, that would create a bigger impact, if you would, on the lapse. And then you drop all the way down, and you would end the year with, we're projecting 53 million in your fund balance. And then we always do a calculation on your administrative rate, our administrative rate, and based on that, the numbers, it was 7.34%. So just to kind of outline what the other different scenarios were. So scenario 2 would be just if we left everything the same. We didn't reduce, we didn't roll back, we didn't do anything. And that may be an acceptable scenario to you as well. that would generate, all else being the same, that would generate 11.66, that green number, that box to the far right. And you may be happy with that, and that's fine. We are recommending scenario 1 because we feel like we've heard you loud and clear that, you know, you want to bring down that reserve. So that could be an option perhaps as well with no change. Scenario number 3, we attempted, and at the time we met, we didn't know, and we still don't know what that rolled back rate amount will be. We won't get that information until the 1st of July, which happens to be on a Saturday this year. And then we come before the board July 6th or 12th. So we attempted to calculate what we thought the rolled back amount would be, and we came up with 7671. So we thought, well, let's throw that in and see what that does. So if we were to do the rolled back amount of 7671 for 2 years, we would have to bring it back up to the old rate, not the current rate, but the old rate of 8981 for the next couple years to bring that reserve level in line with 9.56. So when I had these conversations with some of you prior to today's meeting, the question came up with, well, what about if we rolled back to 7671, but then we just went back to our current rate, which was 8508. So I generated scenario 4, which I had before you, because we didn't propose this prior to the meeting. The reason was, if you were to go with a rolled back rate for 2 years and then bring it back to our current rate, as you can see, you drop to 8% and then you drop to 2.69, and then you actually have a negative reserve in fiscal year 28 of 4.26. So what that's telling us is that's great. You could go with that millage rate and roll back, but we would definitely have to make some cuts. We would have to reduce programs. We would have to look at staffing. There would be a lot of things that we would need to do in an effort to reduce expenditures. So back to the recommendation, and we'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts. I know Diana's over there and Andrew are like, okay, what scenario are we going with so we can crunch the numbers and be ready for the July meeting, but we'd love to hear your comments and feedback.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'll give my first, and that is I believe scenario 2, in my opinion, is the better scenario, because I go back to the part, as special districts, we don't get FEMA money right away. We're lucky if we get it in a year. We don't get funded by the state like a school district does, or like cities and counties do. So in the event we had a natural disaster and we wiped out a good portion of our tax base, as you can see, those people are exempted from taxes, lose that tax roll. Fort Myers Beach is at 39% of their tax roll is missing, so that was deducted from their budget this year, and from the property appraiser's office. I would be frightened if we didn't have the money to get us through more than just 2 or 3 months in the event something like that happened. And I don't think that we need to keep a year's worth of money in the bank by any means, but I think we need to keep enough that we can manage and keep staff on board to get programs back up, because in the event of a disaster, we're still gonna need help to help the children, right? They're still gonna need help. Families are gonna need help more than anyone else. As we saw in COVID, Beth did a great job of getting the food banks rolling and getting food rolling out for kids and the families as well. That's just a small portion of what happens in something larger scale than the pandemic, something much larger scale of the Hurricane Ian. It takes out the entire county or half a county or wherever it hits. Obviously, Pinellas would take a much larger hit on an Ian than Fort Myers is, because we're surrounded by water. They are not. So my fear is that I believe scenario 1 works well as well. It gets us back to where I think that we're also talking about the 9% over time. So with that, questions, concerns? Judge?
I am most comfortable at a glance with scenario 1. And the reason why I'm most comfortable with that is because we're just talking about for the fiscal year of next year of the rollback to the 0.825, and I prayerfully, we won't have those natural disasters that you're discussing, but there's always the possibility and the probability. And so I just felt comfortable with, given the scenario with what's going on in the world right now, that all taxpayers could use a little bit of break, and anything that we could do for them. I was way more comfortable with this than I was with the scenario number 3.
for what it's worth. I think number one's the right answer as well. I think we have to be concerned about potential natural disasters and the like. We do have weather patterns right now that are actually helpful, I think, to what we're concerned about, since El Nino is maybe warming the waters, but it's also the jet streams are crushing the current storms. But they're early. I don't disagree. They're early in coming across. I think the taxpayer needs a break. And we'll be going into, and I think we have to remember, we'll be going into a strategy session sometime towards the end of next year, correct? And we have lots of, in-depth required looks at what we're doing today. Is it working? Are they not working? What are some of the issues? But also, are there new and additional programs that we might want to either create, add, shift to, and the like? And I think there's probably, out of all the strategy sessions that we've all been in, this one to me just feels like one of major change, and could be. So I would agree with Judge Moore to let's take a little hit. Let's give a little back right now. Get prepared for what may be coming as far as new programs and things in our strategy session, and then we're able to look at it for the next year. I don't like the fact of going from 7.6 to 8.9. I think to me that is it's a unfortunate disaster waiting to happen if we were ever to try to do that. I think it's so it would be too impactful to us, to those taxpayers. We still don't know what the property values are, and if they continue in the direction they're going, and where we are. I mean, the fact is that could even be higher. At least that's what we're seeing. So I think there's some wiggle room in between there. So I would agree to let's take a little deep breath, give the taxpayer a little bit of relief, and prepare them for what we may be coming with next. And if we go back to the current rate, it's not that big of an impact. That's just my thought.
I feel very comfortable with that as an answer, and I think Laura and I and Diana and Andrew probably this would be our recommendation. I do want to point out one thing. It's not a fiscal year 24 issue, and to Judge Moore's point, we're making a decision for fiscal year 24, not for all of these years out. If on scenario one you look out at projected fiscal year 28, just note that there are a couple red numbers in there, and in other words, we're running a cash loss of about $8 million in that year, and we are for the couple years before that, and that's intended to bring down that reserve. But note that that's a pretty big number then to shift from fiscal year 28 to fiscal year 29, where there we would not end up with an 8% reserve in fiscal year 29 unless some other things changed. That doesn't bear on my comfort with scenario one this year. It's just something I wanted to make sure we were all aware of, that as we keep going out year by year, we'll want to watch where that puts us.
And I did want to pipe in as well, as Judge Moore pointed out, and you've elaborated, that we're looking at fiscal 24. And I think one of the things that we were surprised when we did hear from the county is that there was going to be an 11.77% increase in the property values. So to your point, Judge Moore, that the taxpayers really need some sort of break in that 11.77 increase in property values, which is going to give us more money and we can't even spend it, we should be looking at probably some sort of reduction or reduced rate. I did go back and look at a year ago, because we don't have the numbers yet from the county, which of the proponents of the Board of County Commissioners that actually had a reduced rate last year, like we did. And it was the majority of all of them. So of the 15 or so, maybe 10 of them had a reduction in their rate. I don't think we had, I'm looking at it here, as far as an increase. Now, the municipalities are a little different because they, like you said, they have revenues from other sources and so forth, but we're 100% from the ad valorem. We don't know what the county's gonna do. Last year, the county went from a 5.13 to 4.73. So they did do a reduction when you add them all together. So I think that in the taxpayer's best interest, I think that's the best interest of us to present something that would be some sort of reduction. But I wouldn't be for the rolled back amount, even though we're guesstimating what it is. We'll find that out July 1, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be close to the 7 number. Yeah, once we know. So the question we had before you was, is 8250 a good number? You know, do we need to run a couple more scenarios? I mean, I think that's a good number to go with.
Well, I think it's a good number, and I agree with everybody, and the taxpayers do need a break. I don't disagree with that at all. As my statement really was that looking forward, because this is a forecast, and we are only talking about 24, and like I said, I am okay with scenario 1, and when I stated that, just in the forecast, we need to keep in mind as we go forward as the Finance Committee, where those numbers go, and as Beth pointed out, in scenario for 28, we're a pretty big loss. So again, that was just a forecast. My comments are based on the forecast going out. I think personally the 8250 is a good number. We are giving taxpayers a break. We're giving money back. We're not trying to, capture money that we can't spend. So moving forward, I'm 100% agreeing as to where we're going at this point.
I'm just add one other thing. I had a conversation with Susan Ralston. Obviously, she's not here today, and she said it would be fine for me to convey that she was also fine with scenario 1 as well.
Mike?
Well, that's good. Yeah, no, I think that's the right part. The other part of it is that we are looking at it every year, so we can make the adjustments as we might need it. Going all the way to the rollback rate, to me, would make no sense whatsoever, because it just, if I have to turn around and then come back and say, okay, now I'm gonna hit you at an 8.9, I think we'd have an uproar. Although, right now, unfortunately or fortunately, most taxpayers don't really look at our little piece that's sitting there. They see the bigger property value issue. I think, though, while we're doing this, and we're really taking a good hard look at this, and I think that's the right answer to go to 825, I think we also need to really put a heavy emphasis on the programs and what we're getting. I'm hearing a lot of, it just really started more, and maybe it's because new people are taking on new roles in places, but I'm starting to hear more about how are your programs, what are you focused on, are they really, going back to what we've always said from the beginning is, are they providing value, are they really making a difference, and if they're not, what are we gonna do about them? And I think, you are reviewing those, and you are taking a good hard look. I think we have to continue to put emphasis on that, and I think we have to also make it publicly aware that we are really, and the staff is really focusing in on ensuring the highest value is being achieved with the funding that we provide. And if there's areas where we can expand the funding because it is adding more value and going, at least we have something to talk about. And look at it and say, okay, great, maybe we need to add some more out of the funds that we have in those spaces. But it gives the board a chance to really have something solid to stand on and talk about and prepare for. So that's the only other thing I would just say is that, let's go to the 8.25 and then make sure that it's extremely well aware out there that the staff is really, really deep diving on the programs that we have and ensuring the highest value for the money we're spending.
Anyone else? So we take a motion to make a recommendation of scenario 1 to the board.
I'll make a motion that we bring scenario 1 to the board for vote.
Second, Rick. All in favor, aye? Aye. Motion carries. All right. Beth, you're up.
Got a few things that are a little bit lighter. Anything would be lighter, right? Our book bus is, the Pinellas County Schools book bus that we run for some number of weeks during the summer is up and going, and I think you all should have gotten the dates and the places, and you are very welcome to come join the book bus group. It is it is great fun. You see some shining smiley faces when kids get to pick out their own 2 or 3 books. It's wonderful. Want to let you know that April Puchaloo, we are going woo-hoo. You may have seen it on Facebook, but she will be receiving the Spirit of Community Award from the Florida Commission on the Status of Women, and that will be next week in Orlando, and a few of us are going to cheer her on.
Yay, congratulations.
And I just wanted to mention that we've had several promotions around here, and I don't have them all, but I'm looking over at Shannon Phillips, and so I know Shannon, who you are used to seeing here, support the IT for our board meetings, among many other things that she does, is being promoted to business systems analyst or senior business? Oh, business software support. I knew I wasn't gonna get it right, but I know basically what it is you will be doing, so. Anyway, but we're very excited for Shannon.
Congratulations.
And that's really all I had, but it is budget season, so.
There was another item that came up about the dates and times of the Finance Committee meetings.
Yes.
And I know that you've have discussed that in the past, to move the meetings from 1:30, which is what we're having them now for Finance, to earlier in the morning. And just to give you some background why we changed it, it was because at the time, we had Commissioner Seal on the Finance Committee, and she had conflicts with several of the board workshops over at the Board of County Commissioners. So she had asked that we move it to the 1:30 p.m. Chief Milliken has requested that we move it back to 9 a.m. It's better for him, suited in his line of work, but Judge Moore, you're shaking your head,
I
and
don't have to close down court. I'm already closing it down for JWB as it is now.
oh, okay.
So, I mean, if you give me the dates far enough in advance, maybe I could jiggle it, but yeah,
Is there a better day? It doesn't necessarily have to be on
Well,
a
it doesn't have to be
Thursday.
Thursday.
Actually, Thursdays are the best days. Monday,
Okay.
Wednesday, and Fridays, I'm in trial.
Okay,
So
all
if
right.
you move it, you lose me.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
We need you. We need you in
And
court.
because they come few and far between, it's workable. It's not like,
I
the
see.
monthly meetings. So
Right.
if you get them to me way in advance, we'll go ahead and block them.
Well, we only have one Finance Committee remaining in this fiscal year, which is August 24th. So I didn't know, I did not have an opportunity to discuss that with Brian or Susan, because they're not here at today's meeting, about whether or not we would possibly want to move that one up to 9 a.m. And then we certainly can look into it when we schedule the meetings for next year. We'll look at the dates and the times and so forth. We didn't know if the Board of County Commissioners have a regularly scheduled workshop. I don't know.
I don't think so. We're having some other issues with a number of their workshops being on Thursdays and conflicting with our board meetings. And so Commissioner Latvala
Has missed a couple.
has missed, about half of our meetings because he's got a county commission meeting at the same time, or a county commission workshop meeting.
Right.
The only other thing I'd like just to mention, since you're now going to be the board chair, you're sitting in this chair, which is not voting anyway.
Yes.
If you wanted to, if that's a consideration on timing you want.
And I was gonna say that as far as the 24th is concerned, I am fine because it's far enough out. And then, like I said, because the meetings aren't monthly,
Right.
at least I can do my afternoon trials. So there you go.
So we could.
Rick, are you okay with 9 a.m. on the 24th? Yeah, okay. So it seems like everyone's okay for that day.
We'll have to reach out to Ms. Ralston and Mr. Onks just to make sure, but if that's the will of the wish here, I think we're fine with that internally.
Good.
All right. So if you want to reach out to them, see how they are, if they're okay with it, then get back to Judge Moore rapidly so that she
Yes,
can
I'll go ahead and block
adjust
it
her
off.
Yeah,
schedule.
just go ahead and put the hold on your calendar. Julia can send you on hold for now, and then we'll button that down, but
Perfect. Thank you very much.
no, we definitely appreciate you all being here, and I just cringe when I'm worried that I'm not gonna have quorum.
Yeah, and then for me, unfortunately, afternoons are rough because crises occur during the morning that I got to deal with in the afternoon, and I never
Right.
know when those things are going to happen. Today was one of those days. We managed to get over here, but it was a
Well,
tough one.
we appreciate you coming, absolutely.
Okay, anything else to be brought before the Finance Committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, for hooking me up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.